In the midst of the North Georgia foothills lies a massive man-made reservoir created in the 1950s when the Chattahoochee River was dammed. This lake and the land it was built upon has been marred with tragedy and death and seen the very worst of humanity for time immemorial, leading many to believe the area is haunted or even cursed. Is this just urban legend, or does a curse lie over this massive body of water? This is Curious Casefiles, and this week we are deep diving into the curse of Lake Lanier. Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Curious Casefiles. I'm Lisa.
I'm Jamie.
I'm Danielle.
And we are here to entertain you with everything mystery, history and crime. For those joining us live for this first episode, thank you very much for joining us and Happy New Year. It's 2023, everybody. Happy New Year.
Can you believe it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I can't. Happy New Year.
Yeah. And for our first episode, we're going to do a little bit of mystery history for you and look into what is called the world's most haunted lake. And Danielle, do you know where this is?
It is in America, and it's in a
southern
state.
Of course it is.
In one of our southern states in the state of Georgia, and it's known as Lake Lanier.
Yep, named after a poet, I believe, Sidney Lanier.
Is that right? I didn't even know that until now. See?
Yeah.
See, you've learned something, Jamie. You've learned
already.
Something.
Yeah.
But it has a very, very dark history, so it's going to be interesting to go through it all here today.
Yeah, it was very quite intense research on this one. Quite a lot of quite insane, crazy, quite disgusting stuff happened surrounding this area. So without further ado, grab yourself some popcorn or a cake. If you want a cake, feel free to grab a cake. I wish I had a cake. And let's dive in. Or not.
No, let's not dive into
it. To dive in when we're finished.
Keep out.
Yeah. Let's keep out of Lake Lanier in Georgia. So we're going to begin looking at the earliest history we could find on Lake Lanier, and that comes from the 1830s.
Okay.
In 1838 and 1839, US troops sent by the state government of Georgia expelled the Cherokee Indians from their ancestral homeland and removed them to allocated Indian reservations in what is now Oklahoma. Under United States law, and I use the term law very loosely, the indigenous population of the Cherokee farmers had no legal rights to the land that they had farmed for generations. It was basically a government-sanctioned land grab, and the Cherokee basically found themselves in a situation where they had no rights and no legal redress.
White farmers were allocated this land and given a stamped government document, which gave them the legal ownership of the land and the right to drive out the indigenous farmers. This was often done at gunpoint. This is the earliest documented history of the land in Forsyth County being basically stolen away, and the beginning of the dark history that would forever put a stain on the land and eventually the lake which engulfed it.
The next notable incident occurred some 80 years later, and on September 5th, 1912, a local woman named Ellen Grice, the 22-year-old wife of a well-respected farmer, claimed that she had awoken in the dead of night and found a black man in her bed who had attempted to sexually assault her. The sheriff initially arrested 5 black men for this crime: Tony Howell, Isaiah Perkle, Fate Chester, Johnny Bates, and Joe Rogers. Tony Howell eventually confessed and implicated Perkle as an accomplice. He was found guilty by an all-white jury in February 1913, and the sentence is unknown. So it's interesting. It's interesting to note that she said she found a black man in her bed, but yet 5 men were initially arrested. Yeah. So which is it? I mean, were there 5 men in bed? No, she claimed there was one.
I was in bed. I mean,
yeah.
That is strange, isn't it? Because you know, nowadays you were like, that doesn't kind of make sense.
Something's not adding up here,
right.
Ellen.
No.
Yeah.
On September the 7th, a local black preacher called Grant Smith was alleged to have speculated at a community get-together that Ellen Grice had consented to sexual relations with 2 of the accused men. When word of this speculation reached the ears of certain members of the white community, they were furious at the suggestion that a white woman would consent to relations with a man of colour. Well, I'm furious at the allegation that 5 black men were in her bed, or 5 men of any colour, really, fitted into Ellen Grice's bed, because that's ridiculous. An angry mob thus captured Grant Smith and dragged him to the town square, where they violently beat and whipped him until he was near death. Thankfully, there was one person that had their head screwed on, the Forsyth County Sheriff, William Reed, who managed to intervene just in time and pulled the preacher to the safety of the local courthouse. He then gathered the other accused and sent them all to separate jails for safety reasons, which we'll find out later was not safe at all. Whether or not the 2 black men accused of assaulting Grice were actually guilty of their crimes is unknown, but I'm sceptical. It acted, however, as a flame to ignite the already tense relations in the deep American South against African Americans.
On September the 9th, 1912, 18-year-old Sleety Mae Crowe was found unconscious in the woods near Oscarville. She had been sexually assaulted and beaten almost to death. She later died from her injuries on September the 23rd, just after her 19th birthday, which had fallen on the 16th. It was speculated that she had been hit from behind and dragged into the woods, where she was sexually assaulted and struck in the head with a rock at least 3 times, which literally caved in her skull. Reports from the time also indicated that her eye was hanging from its socket, which is beyond horrific, to be honest. Yeah, that sounds not nice at all.
Yeah. Typically, this kind of head trauma and blows to the head, like when you're repeatedly bashing somebody in the face or like stabbing them repeatedly, indicates that the attack was personal and that the person that done it was known to the victim. So this was a complete stranger. Like you find in
that shows the rage, doesn't it?
It's like rage, overkill. There's just no need to do that. Yeah. And when you're especially focusing on the face, that's personal.
Well, they're trying to hide the face because they don't want them staring at them with the pain that they're causing or whatever. Or they cover the face, don't they? Typically.
I wonder if that would still be the case today. You know, in contrast, you look at today's world and.
Oh, people be crazy today. Oh,
yeah, you don't even need a motive.
Kind of crazy then, but
you don't even need a motive, and so it makes you wonder if today, if by the same standards, would they come to the same conclusion? But definitely,
as the general consensus. But I mean, you could argue that people are crazy today, but they don't sound very sane back in the early 1900s either.
No, No, which takes us then to the accused. And so the local white community, despite having zero evidence to substantiate their beliefs, believed that the crime had been perpetrated by a black man.
Of course they did.
Surprise!
Of course they did. It
Shock
fit.
horror, everybody.
You talk about narratives, it totally fits the narrative of that day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So already fueled by the Grice incident, which took place, residents basically rounded up any black man in the area that they could find and arrested him or them. The first arrest was a 16-year-old, Ernest Knox, who was forced to confess after a prominent local resident mock lynched him with a rope from a nearby well. So, being terrified, of course, this child then confessed and implicated his uncle, Rob Edwards, and his wife, Jane, along with his cousin, Oscar Daniel, and all three of whom were promptly arrested.
So now we've got a woman involved now. It's like,
Yeah.
why not a wife as well?
Why not?
See?
So shortly after his arrest, Rob Edwards was forcibly removed from the Atlanta jail, which, as you remember, is where he was put for his own safety, by a crowd of almost 2,000 men.
Wow.
It's ridiculous. You can't even imagine something like that happening in this day and age, but God. Anyway, they stormed the jail, dragged him out, and lynched him on a nearby telephone pole. But that wasn't it. Oh, no. No, it wasn't. The mob then fired hundreds of bullets into his body whilst he hung from the pole. And it should be noted that nobody has ever been held accountable for this murder, basically. They murdered him.
Mm-hmm.
Innocent until proven guilty, everybody. Soon after, both 16-year-old Ernest Knox, whom the girl had allegedly accused on her deathbed, despite her skull have been completely caved in with numerous blows to the head from a rock and her eye hanging out, and 17-year-old Oscar Daniel were both found guilty of the assault and murder of May Crowe after a very, very lengthy one-day trial. They put a lot of effort into this trial. The jury then took less than an hour to decide their fate.
One day trial in less than an hour. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
You know, and it wouldn't have mattered if they would have pled guilty or not guilty. They were already, they were going to be the scapegoats. They were going to be the ones that were going to pay.
That was decided, which I think Jamie's now going to prove.
Well, they kind of seemed to just rounded up as many people as they could for it. Right. Again, we saw earlier.
They're African American. Let's arrest them.
Yeah.
Right.
Really, really, Georgia, really
bad.
They were taken from the jailhouse and immediately hanged. It was against state law to publicly hang defendants, so the gallows were constructed the day before and a fence erected around them. This was before the youths were even convicted, by the way. That evening, before the hanging, the fence was burnt down. It is estimated that between 5,000 and 8,000 people gathered from nearby communities to watch the hanging of these two teenage boys. It has been said that they were celebrating as these boys were hung. The total county population stood at only 12,000 at this time. So when you consider that as 5,000 to 8,000 and the 12,000 population, that's almost nearly all the people.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Just,
everybody had to come out and watch.
It's very doubtful to me that the level of head trauma, as we said, and the fact her eye was hanging out and she was unconscious, that she ever regained consciousness and named anyone. I very, very highly doubt that. I don't think that happened at all. That seems to be something that was added on. There is no official record that happened, but it had been speculated at the time.
Yeah.
The trial.
Incredibly. You can't even call that a trial, really.
No.
It was a decision. Yeah. It was a decision.
The kangaroo court, basically. The kangaroo court, which had decided before it even took place by constructing the gallows the day before.
Well, we know, that's bound to take some time and planning and everything. So, they knew. Yeah.
And also, what happened to given time for appeals? If you're getting a death sentence, don't you get taken straight for the courthouse and hung? Where's your appeal time?
Yeah, I don't know what the appeals process was back then, but there definitely was no justice.
It was a bit shit. So even if you look at the lower end of the estimate, that is almost half the population of that entire county that turned up to watch two teenage boys be
Yeah.
killed, basically.
And I'm sure some of it included families
Disgusting.
because they want their children to see this wonderful justice being done, but
That's disgusting.
very much
Yeah.
injustice.
And it's actually quite terrifying that was only just over 100 years ago. It
Yeah.
sounds like something that should have happened like hundreds of years ago, not just.
Yeah, it's
Well-
kind of barbaric sounding. I get what you're saying. It's very uncivil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at the very least, with them being teenagers these days, they would at least give them a chance. I mean, we've seen people some teenagers do some dreadful stuff today, and they actually, put them in so-called prison, but they take them on holidays and things like that these days. So, yeah.
And they obviously wanted to see this hanging. They burned down or tore down whatever the fencing was.
They want to see it. They want to witness it.
Yeah, that was entertainment.
And they've already
back then,
took one of them and like fired hundreds of bullets into him, so he didn't even get a trial. At least these got a trial, not that it was worth having.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're children as well. They're getting tried as adults. I mean, I don't think that anywhere in the world today, I would hope, would give a child a death penalty.
No.
Oh, definitely not to that degree. No.
It's just disgusting. I'm disgusted.
Disgusting.
Disgusted.
So on the night of Sleety May Crowe's funeral, enraged white self-titled vigilantes, known collectively as Night Riders, gathered at the town's crossroads armed with both guns and dynamite. And they descended on
with the TV program with the little car.
Yeah. No.
That's a nice Night Rider. These are terrible.
That came several years later. So,
yeah.
But they descended on the black population with fury. Obviously, they were fired up, angered. They were willing to go after this group and make an example out of them. And they were spurred on with sensationalized news reports in the media. Some things never change, right?
It's not like the media to do that, Danielle.
No, same thing's going on today. And they were including quotes from the parents of Crowe, who went on record with the media to say that they wished to be rid of the town's black population, whom they referred to as the fiends of hell. I mean, these poor people, I swear. Over the coming weeks and months, these Night Riders, who were essentially the KKK, drove out the entire black population of Oscarville and the nearby town, like Cumming. Many of the residents of the black communities were scattered along the banks of the Chattahoochee River. And the Night Rider tactics were vast and ranged from throwing stones through windows, firing guns through doors, executing pets and livestock, to the extremes of then burning their homes and businesses to the ground. They even went so far as to post notices in certain areas alerting people that they had only like 24 hours to leave before their properties would be burnt and they would be violently chased out. So, unsurprisingly, those scare tactics worked, right? I mean, these were defenseless people and thousands of people against them. So within months, virtually every black resident in Oscarville had fled the area, over 1,000 people. It was essentially an ethnic cleansing, is what they called it. And after its abandonment, certain areas of Oscarville became a virtual ghost town.
I should imagine so.
Yeah, even like despite all these scare tactics, which in themselves are absolutely disgusting, like they're murdering people's pets and livestock, just the actual fear that would have been in this black community at the time, because they had taken Robert Edwards and lynched him and then shot hundreds of bullets into him in the middle of town, and nothing happened. There was no legal redress for that. Nobody's ever been held accountable for that. And then 2 of the children of this community are hung, and half the county turns out to watch it. Even without all the crap that these Night Rider twats were doing, these people would have been terrified.
Well, you imagine that was, like you say, that was bad enough. And then, these other people, other families who were, who weren't getting attacked at the time, saw these other people getting attacked and could see them even like killing the pets. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean,
who the hell do these people think they are, that they've got the right to force these people out of their homes and give them 24 hours notice to leave? And really?
Yeah. And all those false accusations and Of course they were terrified. I mean, they were wondering who was going to be next, right? Who's going to come in and drag us out?
The media had a big part to play in this.
Yeah.
And I do feel a little tiny bit sorry for the parents of May Crowe, because they'd obviously lost their daughter under some quite tragic and disgusting circumstances. I mean, to see her like that with her eye hanging out and all, that's terrible. But going and saying that they want the entire black population driven out and calling them the fiends of hell, really?
Yeah.
You're not getting justice for your daughter. In fact, you probably never got justice for your daughter, because the person who really did it probably was never held accountable.
Well, it's kind of ironic that they're calling them the fiends of hell while they're, running around and
acting like demons.
Attacking people and dragging people out of their homes and killing them and their pets and everything.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
Ridiculous.
Now we are going to jump forward a couple of decades to get past that was the horrible history, that mess, and we're going to go to 1946, when the Army Corps of Engineers was tasked with the job to dam the Chattahoochee River, and that area is already dammed, in my opinion. But that's a whole other story.
We'll find out more.
They had set their sights on this area for the construction of a reservoir or a man-made lake, which we now know today as Lake Lanier. This would provide hydroelectricity, flood control and drinking water for the larger towns flourishing along the river and nearby Atlanta. However, before any work could commence, the government first had to purchase the land that would, within a few years, become the bottom of the new lake. Land that had already been settled and developed for generations. And they were determined to purchase it all of it, no matter how unscrupulous the tactics they deployed to do so might have been.
The first of these many transactions was in 1948, when Henry Shedburn, an 81-year-old ferryman in Forsyth County, sold his 100-acre farm, known as Shedburn's Ferry, to the United States for $4,100. I'm going to just say at the moment, he actually done pretty well when you hear the rest, the rest got, to be honest.
Seems like the United States government got a bargain, but
Yeah. Over the following 2 years, the federal government continued to buy up the land. More than 50,000 acres total of prime fertile farmland from individuals and corporate businesses alike. And that was done all on the cheap. Mostly sold for about $50 an acre, you see? You see that? So he actually done better than the rest, I guess. It's unknown exactly how many families were bought out and relocated during this process, or the tactics they used to get them to sell up and bugger off, basically. But, it was estimated to be around 700, I believe. It is also reported that those who refused to sell the land had it seized from them for a variety of unjustified reasons. And they were forcibly removed from their family homes and businesses, which were left abandoned to be overtaken by the dark, murky waters that would become Lake Lanier. The paltry sums these families were paid for their land was not enough to survive on or relocate in the area. So most of these residents were forced to leave the area completely. Surprise, surprise. That weren't done deliberately or anything, I should have thought. And they had to start afresh somewhere new that was cheaper to live. So same again. Yeah.
So same old pattern with the U.S. government, right?
Yeah. The same as what they done with the Cherokee Indians back in the 1800s. But they forced these people. A lot of these people didn't want to settle up. Obviously, they were quite happy where they were.
It was their home.
And the ones that refused to sell, they evicted them for just stupid, made-up reasons. Like, you're evicted because they had their sights set on it. They were going to do it. If you didn't want to sell your land, tough.
Yeah, there was no negotiating. It was going to happen in their eyes, no matter how it was going to go down. It was going to happen. So that brought them to the construction of the Beaufort Dam. And that began on March 1st of 1950. It took 6 years and $45 million to complete the dam. And by 1956, the backwaters of the Chattahoochee River began filling the once dry areas of the North Georgia foothills. And with each passing week and month and year, the water crept in, and it was covering what was the abandoned towns and farms. And it filled eventually after 5 years to such proportions that the new Lake Lanier was completed finally. The new lake encompassed 59 miles of water, was 26 miles long, and covered an area totaling 39,000 acres and included almost 700 miles of shoreline. It reaches depths as great as 211 feet right at the Beaufort Dam itself. So it's pretty enormous.
That is, yeah. Well, they had to cover up hide a lot of crap up under there, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Several small towns were situated on the land that is now the bottom of the lake. For example, Sevier, Oscarville, Storeville, and Absalom, which lay between Cumming and Gainesville. The remains of these communities are still submerged beneath the surface of Lake Lanier, and even today, when the water level drops low enough, remnants of what used to be the land are seen jutting out of the water like ghosts from the past. Concrete, bridges, and even an entire racetrack known as the Looper Speedway remain underneath the water. Authorities claim the huge amount of drownings is because people get caught in the debris lurking beneath the surface. But researchers who have spent decades studying this lake believe that this is only a part of the issue, and the source of the darkness over Lake Lanier is a Native American burial ground, which it always is in the movies, so I believe them. Everything's always built on a Native American burial ground.
Yeah.
That was submerged under the lake during its construction. And there actually is one, so I made that sound like it was, but there is one. They found one, which we'll get into in a little while.
Right.
During the construction of the new lake, 20 cemeteries had their remains dug up and moved.
Allegedly.
It's unlikely that the residents of multiple small family cemeteries were successfully moved before the waters rose, or that those in the official cemeteries with unmarked graves were relocated. Caesar Yarborough, a spokesman for the US Army Corps of Engineers, told CNN recently that many of the unmarked graves of residents or even indigenous tribes that have been forced out of the area are probably still there underneath the waters of Lake Lanier. He probably had a clue, didn't he? He knew, basically. Yeah. But he was saying it politely.
They're not probably still there. They most definitely are.
Definitely.
He used the excuse. He stated the technology to identify unmarked burial sites with scanning was far less robust 70 years ago. He added, while the Corps made every effort at the time to locate unmarked burials, the limited capabilities of the time made it probable that unanticipated finds of human remains are possible, whether from the antebellum or Civil War era or the Native American origin from colonial and ancient times. So basically, the government admitted that they probably did flood there. We might have done, we might have not, but we know it was, yeah. And that's where they all remain now, unmarked and forgotten to this day. Who knows how many bodies are hidden in that dark waters of the Erie Lake that we're now discussing about?
Yeah.
I can't think it get any worse.
It sounds like a movie that came out in the early 80s.
Yeah. Now, they claimed, or this Caesar Yarborough claimed, that they didn't have the technology back then to identify unmarked graves. But it's not just unmarked graves. They didn't need any specific technology to blatantly identify a grave that is marked.
Right.
A grave marker, it's got a tombstone.
Sometimes.
And these were left, and these have actually been seen by people that have dived into the lake. You can actually see these gravestones that they weren't moved at all. They're still there. You didn't need any special technology. All you needed was eyes to see that.
Yeah.
Well, because it wasn't just headstones. A lot of times there was the statues, like the cherubs or the angels, things like that around them. When you take a look at some of the footage that was shown for that, there's no denying that there's a grave there.
Yeah. So if they've not even bothered disinterring and moving the remains in marked graves, I highly doubt they put any effort at all into looking for unmarked graves, regardless of what technology was available.
Yeah, that was kind of admitting it without totally coming out and saying it, and really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, in 2007, there was a drought, and the water levels went to the lowest levels that the lake had seen since its creation. And because of the drought, they were able to see and discovered an area called the Summerar Mound, and that was a Native American burial mound. The mound, which is completely submerged, usually underwater when the lake is at full capacity, is located where the Chattahoochee and Chestatee rivers merge. It's believed that prior to the lake's construction, the mound would have been about 100 feet high, looking over the river basin itself. So, with water levels going up and down, these kinds of things can be seen and investigated.
Yeah, well, I guess they never banked on that happening at the time because they're like, oh no, we've been, our little secret plan has been foiled. Yeah, people are spotting it.
Right. I mean, we're talking ancient burial grounds here. I mean, yeah, you can say legend or what have you, but let's face it, our Native Americans were here well before and had their own ways of doing things. And yeah, there's a belief that the power of ancestral spirits cursed Lake Lanier, and you have reason to believe that that could be the case.
Bad juju, Danielle. Well, yeah. Bad juju.
I mean, also, when you sort of research these sort of different topics like we do, that do come up a lot, don't it? Like Lisa said earlier about ancient burial grounds, they always get mentioned. You always find that there's these sort of come up in all these sort of mysteries.
Well, yeah, the Native Americans believe that there's a lot of power in those spirits, and just desecrating them is going to bring a lot of bad spiritual energy.
And it doesn't even have to be Native American land either. I mean,
any grave, really.
Yeah, desecration of any, site like that would be reason to believe there could be some bad spiritual energy there.
So we looked at the construction of the lake. Now we're going to look into the tragedies that have befallen this area. So since the 1950s, it is estimated that almost 700 people have lost their lives on this lake, with over 200 of those being documented since 1994. It's such a staggering number of fatalities that over the years, many have concluded that these waters may indeed be cursed. It would be easy to assume that given its size, it's not a massive number of fatalities when you look at the fact that it's over 70 years. However, other lakes across America of equal or greater size, including man-made lakes, have not experienced anywhere near the amount of tragedy that Lake Lanier has. So that leaves a lot of questions to be answered.
Indeed.
Why this lake and why so many?
Aside from the fatalities attributed to the lake, we also have multiple survivors who almost drowned on the lake, who tell strange tales of feeling unseen hands are trying to drag them beneath the surface.
Ooh.
Or that the water felt like molasses and was thicker than it should have been and was pulling them under.
Nope.
Very strange.
Can you imagine that, just having a nice swim and then a hand grabs you by the ankle?
That was spooky. But
I think I'd have a heart attack. I'd have a heart attack.
Indeed. These experiences and others like them have been reported by many over the decades and has led to the belief that the lake is haunted or even worse, cursed. Surprise, surprise. Buck Buchanan, a diver on Lake Lanier, stated in 2017 to local media that he often felt body parts in the lake during his various excursions. He stated you reach out into the dark and you feel an arm or a leg and it doesn't move.
Slightly, no offense to Buck Buchanan, but the way he described that sounds like he's just swimming about the lake, fueling people up.
Yeah. Well, and it says various excursions. I mean, obviously he's going back into that lake over,
Why would, if you're like feeling body parts, why would you go back?
Yes.
What are you doing, Buck Buchanan?
Why does he keep going back? Yeah.
Stop it, Buck.
No reason to go back in there.
Yeah, experienced divers have all felt these unseen hands. I don't know about the legs, that's only Buck Buchanan, but they've all felt these unseen hands or experienced anomalies in the lake where the water's consistency's changed to molasses. And many have had experience on the lake for years. It's not just the first time they went on that lake. Mm-hmm. So, like the different tides for like different kinds of water or like the drop-offs. So it's weird. These people know what the conditions should be like, and they're still having these inexplicable encounters. It's very strange.
Yeah, it's still going back for more. I don't know. No.
Stop going back. Stop it.
Maybe it's slightly. It might be scary and strange, but it might be also quite intriguing, perhaps, if you're a diver.
I'm not intrigued. I'm not intrigued.
No, but you're
If,
not
if I
guess-
was,
like-
guess-
if I
I guess
was
it could be.
swimming, if I was swimming and something grabbed my ankle, I would never go back. I'd probably have a heart attack, but if I survived, I wouldn't go back.
Well, there's got to be some thrill seekers out there, I guess, and maybe that's their thing. But yeah,
Really, no, Danielle. It's bloody terrifying.
it is terrifying. I wouldn't be doing it. So, why do people still go there, right? The
Exactly.
lake,
Why? Why?
because it is known, and the lake has become infamous for its unusually high number of deaths that occur in its murky waters, from boating accidents and drownings to cars careering off the road into the lake and people ending their own lives as well. On average, there is 9 to 12 drownings alone on the lake per year. And over recent years, 27 people who went missing on the lake have never been found or recovered. Yet, bizarrely, despite the alleged curse and the high death toll and bizarre tales surrounding the lake, people still flock to its shores in droves. It averages a staggering 11 to 12 million visitors per year.
Why?
Those thrill seekers again, or something. So Sergeant Chris Temple with the Hall County Sheriff's dive team, who's been diving in the lake since the early 2000s, stated, "Diving in Lake Lanier probably is one of the most dangerous things I've done in my career. The lake's picturesque bridges are some of the most dangerous underwater environments for swimmers, boaters, and divers." Sergeant Temple continued, "The bridges are like the trash bin for anyone traveling down the road. You have concrete, rebar, all the fishing line that gets tangled in the debris at the bottom of the lake. For example, refrigerators, safes, shopping carts, etc. Bodies, arms,
Yeah.
legs."
Bodies,
Yeah.
graves.
Yeah.
Diving bottles and equipment and goggles.
I mean, I know when they built this lake that recreation was not even thought about. It was just like it was all for hydroelectricity and drinking water, which
Yeah, that leaves something to be talked about as
yeah,
well.
recreation was an afterthought. But I mean, really, people really
What do they expect people
why?
to do?
Why? Go
Yeah.
some. There's plenty of natural lakes that are not cursed that you can go on your holidays to.
Mhm.
Sorry, vacation. Go on vacation to a nice
Well-
natural lake that's not got people trying to murder you by pulling you under the water.
Yeah, but there's a reason there in what you just stated. So these people are going on holiday. They may not know about all these stories, so they wouldn't know no better until they start diving and start swimming into a
Yeah.
gravestone, and they're like, "Oh my, what the hell is this?"
I suppose there's a percentage of people that are likely to not know anything about it, and they're just going there because it's the lake they
I
want
think
to
if
go
you go on
swim.
holiday though, like if I was going on holiday and I was going to Loch Ness, I would go on Google and Google Loch Ness. Things to do in Loch. If you go on Google and Google Lake Lanier, it's going to tell you all of this
Yeah.
stuff. All of
At
it.
least you're quite safe in Loch Ness because the sightings are so low. That's probably going to be a low chance of you getting attacked by a giant.
You can
Loch
say a
Ness monster.
dinosaur.
Yeah, I
wouldn't
was going to say.
Well,
a Loch
it's
Ness
not. It's not
monster.
just the objects that are unsafe with Lake
you?
Lanier.
Water.
It's the water.
The water itself.
Yeah, which gets us into. I've got to try and say this now. So, yeah, which gets us into Staphylococcus aureus. Is that right?
That's
Is that
right.
Did I say that properly?
I think you did.
Okay, if I didn't, because that's the best I could do.
It sounds
So
fine.
apparently, the silt in Lake Lanier is a cause of a particular strain of Staphylococcus. Many divers have contracted this difficult-to-treat strain of staph simply from coming into contact with the waters of Lake Lanier.
It's going to get you no matter what, isn't it?
It's
I
going to
was
get
going
you.
to say, yeah.
It's coming for you. So this form of staph is particularly difficult to treat because it's resistant to several different antibiotics, for example, penicillin or amoxicillin. It presents as lesion-like boils on the skin, which,
Yeah.
and it's quite dangerous to get these infections because they can be deadly if they're left untreated. So,
Yeah.
if you don't drown when you get grabbed by an unseen hand or get caught up in a
Debris.
Clipper Speedway, Staphylococcus aureus, everybody.
It's going to get you. Yeah.
That alone is one huge reason not to go. You're going to get a disease from the water. You're going to get a disease.
Yeah. And this is the same.
The antibiotics don't work.
And this is the same water that they're using to spread out for the towns for their drinking water, right?
Drinking it.
Yeah, I mean, granted, it's filtered, treated, whatever. I don't care. We
I
know
don't
now.
care.
We know.
I
now
don't care
there's
how
dead
often
bodies.
you filter dead body water. I'm
Yeah.
not wanting it.
There's
I'm
dead
not wanting
bodies under there and everything else. No, no.
Yeah. You can filter the shit out of that. I'm still not drinking it.
No.
So now we're going to take a look at some of the victims that's lost their lives on the lake. On April 16th, 1958, Delia May Parker Young, 23, was travelling with her friend Susie Roberts, 37, to the Three Gables, a local roadhouse in Dawsonville, Georgia. Susie was driving a 1954 Ford across the Dawsonville Highway Bridge on Lake Lanier, when for some unknown reason, she lost control of the car, crashing off the right vertical support of the bridge. Divers entered the lake and searched the area, but neither the vehicle nor any remains were discovered. The only physical evidence on the scene was a set of skid marks that suggested that the woman's car had gone into the lake.
18 months later, in 1959, a fisherman discovered human remains that had floated to the surface of the lake. Further examination yielded no obvious cause of death, and the individual could not be positively identified, although the body was noted for missing both of its hands and several toes. Many assumed that these were the remains of either Delia or Susie, but at the time it was impossible to know for sure. The body was laid to rest in an unmarked grave, of course. Another 31 years passed before Susie Roberts' 1954 Ford was finally found, when in November of 1990, the lake bed was dredged in preparation to set the foundation for pillars of a new bridge. So unexpectedly, the shell of a rusted-out car was discovered with human remains still inside behind the wheel. Through the personal belongings found in the car, a purse, rings, and a watch, Susie Roberts was able to be identified. In considering this discovery, it was concluded that the young woman found decades earlier was in fact Delia May Parker Young.
For 3 decades, Susie Roberts was trapped in her car, hidden under 90 plus feet of water, having come to rest on a steep slope, stuck within the tree trunks, mud, and other debris that made up the bed of Lake Lanier. But now she could properly be finally laid to rest. It is this tragedy that has become the foundation for the most persistent legends associated with Lake Lanier. The apparition of a young woman in a blue dress that has purportedly been seen time and again walking up and down the length of Brown's Bridge, in the woods near the lake, and in the nearby cemetery where both women are now buried. The sightings of the lady in blue seem to increase when people are lost in or around the lake. And according to multiple witnesses who have seen this spirit personally, it is noted that she is missing both of her hands.
Which is very strange.
Why both the hands?
Yeah.
Oh, no fingers, no toes.
Yeah. I wonder why she's not got any hands. Is that something that like the fish a bit or something?
I'm guessing that it was might be from the fish, because you wonder why several toes as well.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Who knows? Maybe when trying to escape the car when it went down, something
Yeah.
tragic.
There is a lot of stories online that say that an unseen force took control of the car and forced it into Lake Lanier. There's absolutely no evidence to back this up. This is just people just making crap up. We don't know why the car went into the lake. We don't know what happened. All we know is they were trying to drive home from this bar and they ended up in the lake. So there was no witnesses that survived. So anybody that says, "Oh yeah, we know that an unseen force took control of the car and veered it into the lake," bullshit.
The lady in blue is speculated to be Delia May Parker Young. This apparition has been spotted in the area since 1950s, allegedly even before they discovered the body.
I actually didn't know that it didn't have any hands then, did it?
She continued to haunt the shoreline of Lake Lanier for decades, and even when her friend's remains were finally discovered and she and Susie were ultimately identified and laid to rest, this did not stop the apparition of the lady in blue.
Nope.
Nobody knows what caused Susie to lose control of the vehicle that fateful night back in 1958, or what events led to both young women losing their lives at the bottom of Lake Lanier. But whatever the case, finally being laid to rest has apparently not settled the spirit of Delia May Parker Young, for she still haunts the shoreline of the lake to this day, trying to communicate something to the living, a warning to stay away perhaps? Who knows?
So better listen to Delia, because she knows. She knows. Stay
So,
away.
I mean, if I'm being warned by an apparition, I'm turning around and going home.
Yeah. If a ghost just tell me, I died here, don't do it.
Yeah, I'm not.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Ghost, with no hands. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. So now we're going to move forward to 1964, specifically Christmas Day. And as previously discussed, Lake Lanier has been marred by unexplained accidents and deaths since its formation. Even beforehand, the land it occupies had been the location of many tragedies over the centuries. However, the deadliest single day on the lake came in 1964, and on all days, Christmas Day.
Yep.
Christmas Day at the Brown Rogers home on West Myrtle Street in Gainesville began as it does for many families with young children, a frenzy of presents, playing, and cooking. With both families occupying one home, Christmas morning was extra busy, and there were 4 adults and 7 children, ranging in age from infants to 6 years old. As the children played with their new toys, the mother spent the morning cooking a Christmas meal. Around 1 p.m., they all decided they wanted some apples for their holiday meal. I'm not sure why, but they wanted apples. So
Don't
both
go
families,
shopping on Christmas Day.
no, and why they all had to go, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Let's all go get some
It's a
apples.
random thing to do on
It
Christmas Day.
is.
I mean, maybe it was a thing in the 60s, but I mean, you didn't really go.
That's random for one person to go, but the whole family to go.
Yeah.
Well, mind you, that might be
Right.
just like they're bored. Yeah,
Maybe it's a tradition.
it could be.
I don't know. But both families, so all of them, piled into the Browns family's 1959 station wagon,
I bet
Yeah.
it's a squawk, isn't it?
right? And they drove across Lake Lanier to a nearby orchard. However, when they hit the 2-mile bridge on Highway 141, the driver lost control of the car and tragedy ensued.
So, according to published reports in 1964, the car clipped a guardrail, hit a power pole so hard it snapped in half, and then flipped into Lake Lanier. Several witnesses and passers-by jumped into Lanier's cold waters to try and help. Divers from the local fire departments were also brought in and reported near zero visibility. The car lay at the bottom of the lake, submerged in about 30 feet of water. One witness jumped out of his car to see if he could help, and he told authorities he saw what he thought was a doll belonging to one of the children floating in the water. He then found out it was actually one of the children who had sadly perished that day. This image, understandably, haunted him for many years after.
But
Yeah, I guess it would. That's awful. I can't imagine coming upon that, thinking it, and then you think it's a doll, and it's ended up being a real child.
It must have affected him for the rest of his life.
It's absolutely tragic when anything like that happens, but when it's a child, it seems even more so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it would have happened if it was anyone, but yeah, particularly sad.
Right.
So according to reports at the time, witnesses said Mr. Brown was driving the car and had been drinking the quote rock gut liquor on the Christmas morning. Although they didn't sort of say if he was intoxicated or not. So
Mhm.
Could have had like
we can
a
guess.
sip to like a
Right.
gallon. You have no
Right.
idea how much he had.
Yeah. Hundreds of people lined at the shores of Lake Lanier that Christmas Day in 1964, praying and then mourning for the families as crews tried to recover the victims. Sadly, 7 of the passengers lost their lives. These were Johnny Edward Brown, 24, and his wife Cora Lee Brown, 23, and 3 of the Brown children. Tommy Brown, age 6, Brenda Sue Brown, age 4, and Joyce Ann Brown, who had just turned 1 on December the 19th, as well as 2 of the Rogers children. Billy Bradford Rogers, aged 2, and his sister Amanda Lee Rogers, aged 3. Only 4 survived: Billy Rogers and his wife Carolyn Rogers, and 2 of the children, 3-month-old Carol Christine Rogers and Linda Brown, aged 3. Unbeknownst to anyone at the time, there was a 12th victim and a survivor of the tragedy, little Kenny Rogers, who was born the following August. Caroline Rogers had been pregnant at the time of the incident.
That's just, well, even the parents, 23, 24, they were really young. And so many little children.
And all in that station wagon, and just only 4 survivors.
I know these are quite big vehicles in America, but 11's a bit excessive.
Yeah.
I would imagine. I mean, how many seats are in these?
Well, I mean, I'm sure there was quite a few, and I'm sure they were packed right in there, but just the whole thing is just so sad. You have 2 full families like that, young children and young adults, and on Christmas Day of all days, and it is tragic.
And it also shows how dangerous this lake is. That, I mean, there were so many people that actually witnessed this actual accident happen and this car go into the lake, and they were in there straight away to try and save this family and these children. And the majority of them, like 7, 3/4 of the people in that car still died. It just shows you how dangerous this lake actually is.
And back then, there weren't sort of safety features for the vehicle, so all them crammed in there. They had to fight their way out, basically, because, I mean, today things are created so you can break the glass easily, and you got all these different safety features and softer materials. That was a sort of, they were built quite well, actually, and that must have been really scary and difficult for them to get out, especially with the pressure of the water and everything.
And who knows what they hit when they went in, because of all of the debris and everything in there. I mean, the chances of them just going in and then submerging slowly, I'm sure didn't happen. I'm sure that they ran into, well...
You have got to consider that it's a man-made lake. Now, natural lakes, when they form, they erode over time, and there's a different sort of geology to them. When you've got a man-made lake and you're just flooding an area with water straight away, you've got areas where it could be like you're up to your ankles in water or knee-high in water, and then one step, and then that's a 30-foot sheer drop.
Right.
It's not at the time over hundreds of thousands of years to erode. So it is more dangerous in a man-made lake, but that doesn't account for everything that's happened on this lake. Because there's a lot of man-made lakes that's had nowhere near this amount of tragedy, but it does add another layer of danger, which is another reason to stay away from Lake Lanier in Georgia, everybody. Stop going. Stop it.
I'd be cautious of all lakes after this, I think, to be honest.
Especially man-made.
Yeah.
Do your research before you go on your little vacations or decide to go swimming in the old local swimming hole. It makes you wonder. So now we're going to get in the time machine and even go further, closer
to a swimming pool with lifeguards. Somewhere that's like controlled environment with no graves underneath the bottom, nothing. It's a nice flat bottom. It's all safe. And if you do get into trouble, there's lifeguards.
Just keep it safe, right?
And put your armbands on. What do you call armbands in America?
Oh, the wings, the little floaties.
Put your wings on.
The floaties.
Put your water wings on.
Yeah. See, we can
rubber ring.
Somewhat joke about it. Obviously, there was serious tragedy here, but the joke is the common sense. People just stay away. Don't go there. So now we're gonna transport a little further. We're gonna back in our little time machine here, move forward to 2015, where yet another tragedy took place. Kelly Nash, who was 25 years old, went missing from his home in Beaufort, Georgia on January 5th, 2015. Now, early that morning, Nash awoke around 4 a.m. with flu-like symptoms, and he was coughing and sneezing, and he told his girlfriend, Jessica Sexton, who was with him at the time, that he felt terrible and should probably go see a doctor before going back to bed. Well, Sexton then woke up again at 7:30 a.m., and she found that Nash was gone, and he hadn't taken his wallet, his car keys, or an ID or anything with him that she could see. When Nash still had not returned that evening, the police were called, and it was discovered that he had a 9mm pistol that was missing from the house, but none of Nash's other belongings were missing or out of place. So it was a little bit of a puzzle as to what actually, where did Kelly Nash go and with what? Why?
So, a massive search would subsequently be launched for Nash, involving authorities, family, friends, and cadaver dogs. A $50,000 reward was offered for any information, yet no trace of the man or his whereabouts were found. It was not until 1 month after his strange disappearance, on February 8th, that Nash's badly decomposed body was found in Lake Lanier by a fisherman. Nash was still wearing the pajama pants and dark shirt that he'd been wearing when he was last seen. It was found that he had suffered a single gunshot wound to the head, but otherwise he had no other visible injuries or signs of trauma. This crime has never been solved, and it's unclear why he chose to go out in the middle of the night in his sleeping clothes, or how he ended up at the lake, and whether he decided to take his own life, there was foul play involved, or if the lake's alleged curse had anything to do with his death. It is indeed very bizarre.
Very unsolved.
Very strange.
And he still had his pajamas on.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
I mean, that does sound like he may have decided to do it himself.
Take his own.
But having said that, he went out of his way to do it, didn't he? And he didn't get dressed.
It does appear like he'd done it to himself, because he went missing, and the only thing missing was a gun. But there's been no indication from any of his family and friends that he was depressed or he had a history of depression or anything untoward had happened in his life, apart from the fact that he said he felt like he was coming down with a flu or something.
Yeah,
and he just vanished, and then he was found still in his pajamas, shot in the head. Weird.
But he wasn't the only case.
No.
He's just one of many, unfortunately.
Yeah. On the morning of August 24th, 2012, a 16-year-old Gainesville high school student by the name of Hannah Truelove went missing from an apartment complex near Lake Lanier, where she lived with her mother. The following day, Hannah's body was found in the wooded area near the lakeside by another resident of the apartment complex. The girl had been stabbed multiple times, yet it was unclear if the wounds were her cause of death or had been inflicted post-mortem.
Which is strange, because they can normally tell. They can normally tell by the autopsy if it's something that's inflicted post-mortem. So I wonder why, because it was like the following day they found her body. It's not like a lot of time's passed, so there's a lot of decomposition. So I wonder why they couldn't tell. It's not really been explained anywhere that I could see why that was unclear.
Yeah. I was just going to say, making the case even creepier was a series of tweets that Hannah had made on Twitter shortly before her death that expressed, like general discontent with her life at the apartment complex and her fear of a stalker. With one chilling tweet, she allegedly stated, "So scared right now." So Hannah's father would later claim that his daughter had made no mention of being under any duress and had not seemed any different or even upset more than usual in the days leading up to the disappearance and her death. Authorities were never able to glean any insights or information from the tweets, and indeed, no leads would ever come up, and no suspects were ever apprehended in the case. Despite a major investigation and an exhaustive amount of interviews with neighbors and nearby residents, none of whom had seen or heard anything suspicious on the day in question, as well as continuous pleas for any information pertaining to the case. So, unfortunately, Hannah Truelove's death remains a mystery to this day.
Which is a recurrent theme on deaths around this area, really. Next up, we're going to look at an actual athlete that lost their life on the lake. Professional basketball player Dorian Pinson, 24, and his friends went boating on the infamous lake on April the 18th, 2021. Unfortunately, he ended up being one of the many victims of this cursed lake, and he drowned that day. Around 86 days later, rescue crews managed to finally recover his body, thanks to some help from modern technology and the generosity of a Wisconsin-based non-profit. As with most cases on Lake Lanier, there's a lot of confusion about what actually happened. It was reported that Pinson had gone boating with 2 other friends on a rented pontoon. At some point, they either fell off or jumped from the pontoon into the lake. A passing boat was able to rescue Pinson's friends, but the Greenville native never resurfaced.
His 2 friends said they were unable to make it back to the boat because of the wind, apparently. Hill County officials spent weeks attempting to find Pinson's body, but eventually suspended their efforts. Then in June, the family started a fundraising campaign to hire a private dive team to continue the efforts. At the time, Alicia and Johnny Pinson, Dorian's parents, quit their jobs and moved from Greenville to Gainesville to be closer to the crews. In the end, it was the private team that managed to locate the basketball star. This young man was like a physically fit athlete and apparently a decent swimmer, just like many other people who have lost their lives on the lake. The tragedy of their passing leaves a sense of bewilderment as they were athletic, fit, and able to swim and save themselves. Or so they thought. Yeah. Even professional lifeguards have been challenged by the waters on Lake Lanier. Because, like we said earlier, it take on an appearance of molasses and a thick consistency, so they struggle as well.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be weird, like there would just suddenly consistency of the water changing.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like, why, you figure water's water, right? But then all of a sudden you're like, it's this thick muckiness is what I'm guessing.
I mean, there's a slight difference between like salt water and fresh water.
Yeah.
With the consistency, but you would expect if you're in one body of water that it's not going to change in the middle of your swim.
Right.
That's unless what I can think of is perhaps because we know there's all these obstacles in the water and they might get covered by sediment, and as they're moving about, that might be disturbing the sediment, which then might make it feel thicker because there's
salt and stuff.
Particles.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You never know.
That makes sense. Well, in 2019, Jeff and Jess Williams were enjoying Don Carter State Park and swimming in Lake Lanier with their 3 sons, including their youngest, Justice. In the days following, Justice started to get sick after they went swimming there, and doctors told them that the illness should pass. But the boy's condition only worsened, and he developed a severe infection and died less than 2 weeks later. The couple didn't know how it happened until they saw a news report in June that River Forks Park was shut down for high E. coli levels, and they realized that their 2-year-old son must have been swimming in risky waters. I was a snow globe of grief in the days and weeks following his death, Jess Williams said. It took her husband's nudging to inspire them both to turn their story into something that they could do to help others. On Wednesday, April 20th, 2022, the couple revealed the first of 8 water safety signs that are going up at parks around Lake Lanier to help raise awareness about harmful bacteria and ways that people can protect themselves. I myself am from right outside of Atlanta and did not grow up around the lake, Williams said at a ceremony for the first new sign at River Forks Park on Wednesday. The risks associated with its water safety were nowhere near the forefront of my mind until several weeks after May 17, 2019, the day that Justice was called home to be with the Lord. That's so sad. That's tragic.
And it's actually disgusting as well that, I mean, for 70 years now, you've had all these deaths on the lake, and it took, just for like the safety, the E. coli part of it, it took until 2022 and the death of a 2-year-old child for a sign to finally be put up on this lake to say, this might be a little bit dangerous. There should be signs everywhere around this lake saying this is dangerous, but I mean, that's one thing, like the E. coli levels or the bacteria. 2022, really?
Yeah. It's a very historical lake. I mean, when you think about how far this all went back and all of the dangers involved in it, why weren't there more signs and water testing going on with all the they know underneath the water? Why wasn't?
Well, because you had like the staph earlier, and then you got E. coli. God knows what else you got in there.
Well, not just that. It's like even in general, without all the sort of risks and the disasters what's happened in and around the lake, normal bodies of water normally have warning signs.
Yeah.
no swimming, diving, etc. No fishing in this area, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
No boating.
Just no nothing in
No,
this
it's
area.
nothing.
Nothing. Don't do anything in this
Don't do
area.
nothing. Yeah.
Stop it. So, back to the infectious waters, which is just one of the many, many problems with Lake Lanier. Stormwater runoff is the most significant source of pollution to the Chattahoochee watershed. In certain areas, following heavy rains, we do see elevated levels of E. coli, which could exceed the Environmental Protection Agency's recommended values for recreational areas. So why wasn't there signs? Why? Why? It is advised that people should avoid swimming in the lake when it appears muddy or brownish, or ever. In my opinion, don't come for me. Although infections are rare, they are also extremely difficult to track, understandably. When people get an infection and they receive care, they often can't tell if the lake was the source of the issue, and in many instances, they might not even consider that the lake is a source. If you got like some sort of E. coli poisoning, you might think it's food poisoning. You wouldn't think, maybe it's a swim I went for in that really crazy haunted lake.
Yeah.
Cases like Justice's are therefore rare, albeit tragic, but the people most susceptible to an infection are very young children, elderly people, and those with autoimmune issues, all of whom should avoid Lake Lanier, along with everybody else that doesn't fall into any of those categories. If you are alive, don't go there.
Stay away from the water.
Yeah.
Everybody from age 0 up to, just to cover everything, I'm going to go to 160, just in case there's somebody really old that fancies a swim. Doesn't matter what your health condition is, don't go there.
Visit the area, take photographs.
No, don't even visit the area, because there's a ghost in the woods as well.
Send a drone. Send a drone overhead.
Yeah, send a drone.
Send a drone.
So not only avoiding because of the dangers of E. coli, but obviously, as we mentioned, the staph infections from the silt, there are a whole lot of other potentially toxic substances lurking beneath the surface of this lake. From the human remains in the graves at the lake's bottom that the government refused to move, obviously, and then they pretended that they did, and then blamed that they didn't have technology to see a grave, to the different construction materials in the buildings now submerged underwater. And a lot of these buildings probably contain things like asbestos, etc. To the potentially toxic oil and paints from the many boats that have sunk in the lake or cars that were lost to the lake. There's a plethora of risks lurking beneath the surface of these waters that goes far beyond the debris. So the fact that all that crap is under the surface of the water, you need to stay on top.
Including decomposed bodies. No, yeah.
They're kind of sort of starting to sound a bit like a
rubbish dump.
That's what I was going to say, a tipping place.
Yeah.
So these are just a very small example of the hundreds of lives that have been lost on this body of water since the 1950s. And there's hundreds more. We could go over them all, but we would be here for weeks. And there's been so many tragic accidents, bizarre deaths, the taking of one's own life under bizarre circumstances. The loss on and around this body of water is immeasurable. I mean, it's not just the 700 lives, it's the thousands upon thousands of lives that were affected by each of these individual losses. People lost mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, grandparents, brothers and sisters. Husbands and wives, and it's tragic. And there's so many more. Wish we could name them all, but there's over 700.
The dark history of this man-made lake is vast. Even before its creation, this land has seen a lot of misfortune, evil and death. It has seen the worst of humanity, and people have lost their lives in the most despicable of ways.
Yep.
It is believed this land has some form of ancient curse because sacred indigenous burial grounds were disturbed, not only in the construction of the towns, farms and businesses, but also in the creation of the lake. The United States government has admitted they probably didn't remove all the bodies from the 20 plus known cemeteries in the area. That's not even accounting for the many private family plots and ancient burial sites strewn across this part of Georgia. Therefore, there are a lot of people who hold the belief that the very land the lake is formed upon is cursed, that there are stains so dark on this landscape that no amount of water was able to wash them away. However, a curse is not the only conclusion those who have come into contact with the Lake Lanier over the years have formed as an explanation for the misfortune surrounding the area.
Many believe that the numerous people over the centuries who lost their lives on this land under what were often tragic and frankly quite brutal circumstances are not at rest, and that their restless spirits haunt the area to this day. Whichever it is, curse, haunting, urban legend, or a combination of all three, one cannot deny the amount of death, sadness, and tragedy attributed to this land. Ghostly figures are still seen regularly by locals and tourists alike. People to this day still see the apparition of the handless lady in blue, who we now know to be Delia May Parker, wandering the bridge, perhaps trying to forewarn others of whatever curse or fate tragically ended her and her friends' young lives back in 1958. Possibly her restless spirit is trying to spare others the same fate. The lady in blue is not the only ghost attributed to the lake. The many unseen ghostly hands that survivors have described as trying to pull them under the murky waters are reported by people from all backgrounds and all walks of life. There are also numerous tales of spooky, almost Grim Reaper-like character who haunts this eerie lake.
There have been several reports of a mysterious raft equipped with a lantern on a pole, ridden by a shadowy figure that uses a pole to push it along, and which allegedly appears and disappears out of nowhere. In one quite disturbing account, two fishermen saw the ghostly raft while out on the lake fishing in a rowboat on one cold autumn night at around 1 a.m. in the morning. Nope. In this case, the mysterious raft was around half a mile away in an estimated 45 feet of water, yet the rider was bizarrely pushing it along with a pole nevertheless. Quite a long pole, obviously. At one point, this mysterious figure shouted something undiscernible to the two fishermen, and then he proceeded to jump off the raft into the freezing water and began swimming towards them. Heart attack time, everybody.
Yeah. No.
This, unsurprisingly, scared the shit out of the two fishermen, who soiled their pants and then pulled their lines in, and they were in a hurry, mad hurry, to get out of there, thinking it was perhaps someone meaning to do them harm. Now, I've actually got no evidence that they soiled their underpants, but I highly suspect that happened.
One can imagine. Yeah.
I would have soiled mine.
Yeah.
If the Grim Reaper started swimming towards me at 1 o'clock in the morning
Right.
on the most spotted lake in the world. Anyway, it was at this point that the lantern on his raft, like the Grim Reaper's raft, abruptly went out. When the fishermen shone their boat spotlight out across the water, they could find no sign of the raft or the mysterious occupant who had jumped into the water and began swimming towards them. That's me swimming, everybody. I'm actually not a very good swimmer, as you can probably tell. Yeah.
She really isn't, because she once put floaties on her ankle.
I did. I put armbands on my feet and nearly drowned when I was a child. So yeah, I'm not going to Lake Lanier or any lake because I'm dangerous.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, the black surface of the lake remained calm, and the raft did not appear again.
Well,
and neither did the fishermen, because they were probably refused to go back. And if they didn't refuse to go back, then they're crazy. Crazy.
Well, to be honest, I should imagine they wouldn't have hung around to see her reappeared again. I reckon they turned their little fishing boat into a speedboat, because I'd be rowing as fast as possible. Yeah.
It's crazy the amount of people that just, like I said, thrill seekers maybe, or maybe you've got people that just, well, let's go see if these urban legends are true. But I mean,
nobody needs fish that much.
No, and apparitions of a blue lady, and now you're talking a Grim Reaper. I mean,
this one's a bit creepier than the blue lady, even though she's got no hands down,
and toes.
Probably the wrong choice of words saying hands down, but hands down. This is creepier than the handless lady, because at least like she's like a sort of warning, trying to, like, it's not scary. She's maybe stay away, and she's appearing near tragedies. This thing jumping into the water and shouting at you and swimming towards you.
Well,
Oh, no.
and let's face it, if he's the Grim Reaper, he's coming for death. So they know what he's coming for, right?
No. Nope.
Something's
No.
all sounds a bit fishy to me.
But
I know, I had to.
That's a good thing about sitting beside him. I can slap him when he says,
yeah. So Delia Parker is the one, obviously, that is haunting the lake. That's what they found through the remains, and warning people to stay away. But apparently, people aren't listening.
yeah, listen to her. She knows what she's talking about, everybody. She knows.
Mm-hmm.
And I would, although it would probably still give me a slight heart attack, maybe a mini heart attack, if I saw a handless woman walking out of the lake and walking towards me. I'd probably still crap myself. I'd rather see her than the Grim Reaper.
Well, I just thought of something. Like this is bad, but this is a terrible situation. Can you imagine being fishing on the lake?
No, I can't imagine fishing on this lake.
All right, be hypothetical. You're fishing away on a lake. You see what looks like the Grim Reaper coming towards you in a boat and getting in the water and whatever. So you want to go head for land. You go head for land, and then this woman in a blue dress come floating past with no hand. Where would you go? What would you do? You'd be like,
no. It's like the double whammy.
Yeah.
Now,
it'll keep you away, indeed.
These particular types of rafts are more like something that you would find on a river raft. And the fact that there was the Chattahoochee River, it could be something like not the Grim Reaper, but maybe like what do they call it when you get like an imprint of the past and you just see something?
Yeah,
there's a certain word for it.
An imprint of the past. We'll just go with that.
Yeah, that's what they call it, an imprint of the past.
Yeah.
So it could be the fact that he was like in like 40 feet of water, was it?
Right.
Was it 40 feet? Let me just check.
Whatever the depth.
With a pole.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be that he was actually on the river, like maybe like in 1763.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he died on the lake, on the river, and that's just him.
Yeah.
Maybe he fell off his raft, and that's what you saw. He was.
Maybe you couldn't see where he was going because he had hood up.
Because he had his hood up.
Yeah,
he had his hood up, and he couldn't see, so he tripped over the string that was holding his raft together, and he went, "Oh fuck!" And then he fell in the water. So when they thought that he was shouting at them, he was just like, "Fuck!" That's what happened.
That was just him tripping in the water, and they thought, "Oh no, he's coming straight
They were
forward."
just seeing an imprint of something that happened 200 years ago.
There you go. We'll go with that.
But you still shouldn't go because that's scary.
Yeah. I think the only one thing to cover now is asking ourselves, well, I think you know the answer, our answer anyway. Would you ever venture into Lake Lanier?
What makes you think you know my answer, Jamie?
Because you've just heard about the germs that are in the water, the debris that's in the water, all the different accounts, what happened before the history. You're not going in that water.
I'm not going anywhere near Georgia.
And hopefully...
Sorry, I'm sure Georgia is lovely, but I'm now terrified of Georgia.
Yeah. And hopefully some of the viewers that are watched who may visit there in the future will not go into that water.
Yeah,
no. Hopefully some of the viewers will never visit there in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially don't take your children, please. If you've got a death wish, take care of yourself. Don't bring innocent babies over there. I wouldn't be having any picnics around or swimming in the lake or probably within 5 miles of it at least. Yeah. So
what do you mean if you think you've been romantic inviting your lady friend for a picnic? She's not coming.
Yeah. Come and have a picnic with the ghost with no hands and the little deaf man in the boat.
Sitting there innocently eating your little cheese sandwich, and a woman with no hands comes. No. What do you think? You've sat and listened to the entire history of this lake that we've sat and researched for you, all the way back from the Cherokee Indians to the current day. Do you think that it is just because of the debris in the lake and it's just something that would have happened regardless? Do you think it's an ancient Indian curse because they have disturbed the sacred burial grounds? Do you think it's just a natural, normal haunting without the curse? or is it urban legend? Let us know in the comments. We will read through all the comments at the very least. We might reply to some, depending on how many there is, but we'll definitely read all your comments. We're very interested to know what you think. And you know what I think. I'm terrified and I'm not going anywhere near it. No. I would actually go to a haunted house.
Yeah.
But not to this. No.
Not Lake
You can just
Lanier.
get out of the house, can't you?
Yeah, you can get out of a house. I mean,
Well, you know, even if you take the haunting part out of it, it's the whole danger in it itself, right? We're talking about, once again, all the debris that's under. For crying out loud, there's a racetrack under there. You've got buildings, you've got bleachers, you've got everything under there, decomposed bodies, the E. coli that's present, not to mention the staphylococcus. I mean, there's a plethora of reasons to not go in that lake. You don't need a haunting to be one of them.
That's it. I mean, we're talking about whether people think that's a curse, paranormal activity, if they believe in that or not, or the dangers in underwater. I think that's obviously a total combination, especially now, if not in the past, but definitely now. It's just dangerous.
It's definitely an area that has seen the actual worst of humanity.
Yeah.
I mean, especially what happened with Oscarville and all the racial tensions and what happened to those people. That's the worst of humanity. That is absolutely disgusting, abhorrent, and I'm still shocked that just doesn't even seem like it was that long ago. And it just goes to show how much things have changed in that respect, thankfully, because that is just vile. There's no excuse for anything that happened in Oscarville.
No.
But it's also seen a little bit of the best of humanity, because, I mean, like, the people, especially with the Christmas Day 1964, that just didn't even hesitate to think twice, to jump into that lake to try and save this young family, and the people lining the lake to pray for them and then mourn for them as a community. So it's seen both sides of, like, the worst of humanity and the best of humanity, but it's still very creepy place. A lot of stuff's going on.
But
there.
when you go back to what you just mentioned about the beginning and everything, you see of everything what went on to create that lake beforehand and the leading up to it. I mean, all that, it seems a bit of a waste now, doesn't it? Now you see there's a lake. Obviously, people are using the lake again, but all that sort of where they evicted all them people and got rid of them people and killed them people, all that just for this lake, which basically is like a scrap heap of water. You know, it's horrible.
Well, it's not worth it, is it? Not.
No, it doesn't seem
not worth it.
No, not that it would be worth it, but you know.
No, but in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. It's just like the furthest thing for their mind when they created this lake was recreation. They didn't even consider that at all, which should have been considered, and maybe they would have tidied up a bit better before they flooded it with water, and there wouldn't be so much dangerous debris underneath. But they didn't consider that at all.
No.
However, they did consider that it was going to be drinking water for the people in nearby Atlanta.
Still can't get that.
Dead bodies that they didn't move, and all this stuff with toxic paints and asbestos just flooded in. They did know that was going to be drunk by these people, but they still did it anyway.
Yeah, I don't understand that one either.
Yeah. So I think that there's not much more we could really say about Lake Lanier, and I hope you've enjoyed, if it's possible, this journey and learning the dark history of this particular area of Georgia. This was the very first episode of Curious Casefiles. We will be back every week with a brand new story for you, whether it be mystery, history, or crime. Again, feel free to leave your opinions in the comments. And if you wouldn't mind heading on over to thecuriouscasefiles.com and checking out our store, so that's thecuriouscasefiles.com/store, and checking out our amazing merchandise, which helps support these broadcasts and keep us bringing this material to you.
Afloat.
Keeping us afloat, but not on Lake Lanier. No. We will be back next week with a true crime case for you, looking at a very, very strange... without giving anything away, you might know, if you're into true crime, a very, very strange case where two people lost their lives under quite bizarre circumstances, and it has never been resolved. Called self-inflicted? Definitely not self-inflicted. We'll be looking into that next week. In the meantime, I'm Lisa.
I'm Jamie.
And I'm Danielle.
And we are Curious Casefiles, and we will see you next Tuesday. Goodbye, everybody.
See you later.
Bye.